Christmas night, 9:17 p.m. The lights on the tree were still blinking. My stepmother's favorite cheesy movie was playing in the background, half-muted. There were plates on the table, half-empty glasses of wine, and the faint smell of overcooked ham clinging to the walls. But none of it mattered anymore, because I was standing in the doorway, holding a single duffel bag, with my father staring me down like I was a stranger. "You're not welcome here anymore, Ava." His voice wasn't loud. That made it worse. It was quiet, cold, final. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just zipped up the bag the rest of the way, slipped on my coat, and nodded. Okay. He didn't follow me to the door. Didn't ask if I had somewhere to go. He just turned back toward the living room, back toward her, and left me standing there like a piece of worn-out furniture they'd finally decided to throw away. I stepped outside into the night air. The cold bit through my sleeves as I walked down the front steps and into the street. Snow had started to fall. Not heavy, not beautiful. Just enough to be annoying. I walked past the string lights Dad had put up 3 weeks earlier, the ones I had programmed to sync with music, the ones he bragged about to the neighbors without mentioning I'd set up the system from scratch. That was always how it worked. He used what I gave, and she took what I maintained, and neither of them asked what it cost me to keep that house running. And now I was just gone. No goodbye. No thank you. Just a door that clicked shut behind me. I didn't have a dramatic reason to be kicked out. No drugs. No drinking. No secrets. Just an argument, one that had been coming for years. It started with a comment over dinner. "Maybe if you stopped acting like you know everything, people would respect you more," my stepmother had said, slicing through a dry piece of turkey. I'd smiled tightly, tried to let it pass. Then she added, "You're not a child anymore, Ava. Maybe it's time you figured out how to pull your own weight." And I laughed. I couldn't help it, because I paid the electric bill. I handled the internet, the thermostat, the home security app. I grocery shop half the time, managed the budget when my dad forgot, and even filed their taxes online for the last 3 years, under my dad's login, of course, so he could pretend he'd done it. When I pointed that out, calmly, something in my dad snapped. "You think you're better than us? You've had that attitude since your mother died." That part hit like a slap, not because it was the worst thing he ever said, but because it was so predictable, so lazy. Anytime I stood up for myself, he pulled her into it, like he couldn't separate me from her ghost. And so, 10 minutes later, with the dishes still on the table and the snow just beginning to fall, he looked me in the eye and told me to leave. "I mean it, Ava," he said. "If you don't like the way this house is run, you don't need to be in it." That's the moment I stopped looking at him like a father, and started looking at him like a landlord I didn't owe rent to anymore. I called Ellie as I walked toward the bus stop. She picked up on the first ring. "Tell me you didn't actually leave," she said. "I left." "Oh my God. Ava, can I crash at yours for a bit?" "You don't even have to ask." She lived in a 2-bedroom apartment downtown, about 30 minutes from my dad's place. It was small, drafty, and the radiator hissed like a sleeping dragon. But it was warm, and quiet, and hers. Mine now, too. At least for a while. When I got there, she opened the door and just hugged me. No questions. No lectures. Just warmth. "You okay?" she asked eventually. "I will be." Later that night, I sat on her couch, staring at my phone. The notifications were still coming in, group messages, a few texts from distant aunts, even one from my stepbrother asking if the drama had cooled down. But not one from my dad. I opened the app that managed the house's utilities. My name was still on everything. Electric, gas, internet, water. I could turn off the whole house with one swipe. I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I made a folder on my phone and labeled it "Letting Go." Inside, I started collecting screenshots, account numbers, confirmation emails, payment logs, all the little systems I'd built that no one appreciated until they'd stop working. I didn't make a plan. I didn't plot revenge. But for the first time in years, I realized something. I was never their guest. I was the one keeping the lights on. And now that I was gone, they'd finally understand what it cost to lose me. I was 12 the first time the power got shut off. We were in the middle of a thunderstorm, and I remember thinking the flickering lights were part of it, until everything went dark and stayed that way. No hallway glow, no refrigerator hum. Just silence, heavy and strange. I sat on the stairs waiting for my dad to fix it. He didn't. He was in the living room, half asleep in front of the TV, a warm beer on the coffee table. He blamed the storm. Said it was probably a fuse thing, or just some grid crap. My stepmother grumbled about the weather and lit a candle, like we were in some cozy cabin. But when the storm passed, and the lights still didn't come on, I took the initiative. Found the utility bill tossed on the hallway table, a red notice stamped across the top. Final warning. That's how it started. I dug into his files. I called the number on the bill. Figured out how to make a payment. Used some of the money from a summer babysitting job. The lights came back on the next morning. My dad never asked how. He just said, "Glad the grid sorted itself out." I said nothing. That silence became a pattern. By the time I was 14, I was managing the Wi-Fi router, troubleshooting the thermostat, and explaining to my stepmother how to reset the garbage disposal when it jammed. I downloaded the manuals, created shared calendars, and signed up for account portals using my own email because they couldn't remember their passwords, and I didn't trust them to try. No one asked me to do it. No one thanked me either. It just fell into my hands. At first, I told myself it was normal, that this was how families worked. You help where you can. You step up when things slip. But eventually, I realized something darker. I wasn't helping. I was compensating. Compensating for a father who stopped trying after mom died. For a stepmother who treated every inconvenience like a personal insult. For a house that would have collapsed without someone quietly keeping the gears turning. They never noticed. Not when I started paying the electric bill online with my tutoring money. Not when I reprogrammed the thermostat to save them hundreds on heating. Not when I called the internet provider to negotiate a better plan, switched to my own credit card, and began covering it month after month so I could finish schoolwork without buffering screens. To them, it just worked. To me, it was wait. I remember this one day, right before I turned 16, when my dad came home with his coworkers after some office happy hour. I was in the kitchen, finishing up a script for the smart light automation we'd been testing. My stepmother had asked for scenes, like in those influencer videos. Mood lighting for dinner. A morning routine with gradual brightness. It was basic, but I wanted it perfect. His coworker pointed at the lights as they slowly dimmed and changed hues. "Whoa," he said. "You finally got smart lighting. That's clean, man." My dad smiled. "Yeah, I set that up last weekend." Pretty slick, right? I was standing 10 feet away. He didn't even blink. The thing about invisible labor is that it doesn't stay invisible forever. Eventually, you start to feel it in your bones. In the tightness behind your eyes. In the way you stop volunteering solutions. You learn to measure your worth not by gratitude, but by silence. If no one's complaining, you must be doing enough. That's how I lived. For years. I became the one who remembered to pay. The one who scheduled the plumber. The one who fixed the damn garage door when it jammed during a storm, and neither of them wanted to step outside. It wasn't just about being useful. It was survival. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped being their daughter and became their housekeeper, technician, accountant, and emotional shock absorber, all rolled into one. The real breaking point wasn't even Christmas night. It happened 6 months earlier, during my final semester of community college. I'd been accepted into a state university on a partial scholarship. I was working part-time and freelancing to make up the rest. I told my dad about it one night, sitting across the table, hopeful. His response, "Well, who's going to take care of things here if you leave?" That's when it hit me. He didn't see my future as something to support. He saw it as inconvenient. I stayed anyway, partly because I didn't want to abandon the house while the bills were still in my name. Mostly because, deep down, I was still hoping he'd notice. That one day he'd say, "Thank you. You've carried so much. I'm proud of you." But those words never came. Not when I fixed the heating in the dead of winter. Not when I caught up on the past due gas bill. Not even when I gave up my savings to cover his forgotten car insurance so he wouldn't lose his job. So when he told me to leave on Christmas night, I didn't argue. Because in a way, he wasn't kicking me out of my home. He was finally confirming what I'd feared all along. It was never mine. Back in Ellie's apartment, I sat on her couch scrolling through account dashboards. My name was everywhere. Comcast, Puget Sound Energy, City Water, The Nest Hub. The entire digital skeleton of that house ran through me. I'd made it seamless. And now I was going to let go. Not to punish, but to heal. Because invisible hands deserve to rest too. It started with the Wi-Fi. Not out of spite. Just logic. I logged into the admin panel using the password I'd set 2 years ago, Winter Dollar Unset 1988. The name of my mother's favorite painting, combined with my dad's birth year. He never knew what it meant. He just clicked the connect button and moved on. I looked at the list of connected devices. His phone, my stepmother's tablet, the smart TV, the doorbell camera, the thermostat, the printer, even the fridge. I hovered my cursor over each one, feeling strangely calm. Then I clicked, remove all devices. It was a clean sweep. No mess, no warning. I deleted the network name, reset the admin login, and canceled the service entirely. It took all of 4 minutes. I imagined them sitting in the living room that night, trying to stream a movie, blaming the router, restarting the modem, cursing the damn internet company. Maybe they'd call customer service. Maybe they'd realize the account was under my name. Maybe not. I didn't care. Because it was time they felt the weight of the things I'd carried in silence. Next came the electricity. That one took a little longer. I had to log into the utility portal, which I'd set up back when I was 17, and Dad had missed 3 consecutive bills. I'd added autopay, linked it to my own bank account, and monitored usage like it was my personal duty to keep them warm. Now, I canceled autopay, set the account to close at the end of the billing cycle, left a note under reason for disconnection. Former occupant is no longer responsible for this household. I didn't write anything angry. No passive-aggressive messages. Just facts. Because facts don't need drama. They just quietly undo what others took for granted. The gas bill was next. Then water. Then the smart home apps. Nest, Ring, Hue. All gone. All mine. By the end of the night, I compiled a folder on my laptop titled House Release. Inside it were PDFs of closed accounts, screenshots of confirmations, and a neatly written document that said, as of December 26th, I am no longer the financial or technical administrator of the residence at 148 West Huntington Drive. Any services provided under my name have been terminated or transferred. I have released responsibility with no intention to return. Ava M. Carter. I stared at the words for a long time, not because I doubted them, but because I'd never written anything that felt so final. Ellie came home from her shift at the bookstore around 9:30. She found me sitting cross-legged on the couch, my laptop open, tea gone cold. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just flipping the switches." She glanced at the screen. "Is that the Wi-Fi login thing?" I said with a small smile. "It's officially dead." She sat beside me, kicked off her boots, and pulled her legs up under her. "You're not doing this to hurt them, right?" "No," I said. "I'm doing it because they were never supposed to rely on me forever. They just forgot to grow up. Or didn't want to." She nodded. "You're allowed to let go." I didn't say it out loud, but those words hit something deep. Something I hadn't been able to admit, even to myself. Letting go wasn't about punishment. It was about survival. The next morning, my phone buzzed. "Dad, internet's down. Did you cancel something?" I stared at the screen for a few seconds. Not angry. Just surprised it took him this long. Then another one. "Dad! Ava!" Then a call. I didn't answer. A few minutes later, a message from my stepmother. "The thermostat isn't working. This is getting ridiculous." That one made me laugh. "Ridiculous? You mean like throwing your daughter out on Christmas night after she carried the weight of your household for 7 years?" I locked the phone and slid it under a pillow. By the afternoon, the text had shifted tone. "Dad, just tell me what's going on." "Stepmother, this is petty, Ava. You're hurting us to make a point." And finally, "Dad, we need you to fix the power. I can't figure out how the bills work." That one stung more than I expected. Not because I felt bad, but because he still didn't see it, still didn't understand that I was never his utility manager. I was his daughter. And instead of treating me like family, he treated me like a free service with no login credentials. That night, I pulled out my journal, the one I used to keep hidden under my mattress. The one with sketches of future apartments, plans for grad school, and a fantasy checklist I titled, when I live on my own. I flipped to a blank page, and I wrote, I let them borrow my peace. Now I'm taking it back. Then I closed the book, poured myself a fresh cup of tea, and queued up a documentary on Ellie's ancient TV. The Wi-Fi was slow. The picture was grainy, but it was mine, and I didn't have to fix it for anyone else. Somewhere across town, my old house was dark, cold, confused, and for the first time, not my problem. The first real consequence hit on New Year's Eve. I was helping Ellie rearrange her bookshelves when my phone buzzed. A text from my cousin Julia. Hey, Uncle James just posted something weird on Facebook. Said the furnace is out and your house is freezing. You okay? I stared at the screen for a second before typing back. It's not my house anymore. There was no response. Not right away, anyway. But that night, while the world was counting down to midnight, I was counting the days since I'd left and watching the ripple effect unfold. The heat was probably the first real crack in their new, unsupervised world. The thermostat I'd installed, connected to the smart system, programmed for energy efficiency, linked to weather updates, no longer worked without the Wi-Fi. No remote control, no auto-schedule, no alerts. I'd built a whole routine for them. Warm up the living room by 6:45 a.m., drop to 65 at bedtime, switch off when no motion was detected. Without it, the furnace was just an old box humming in the basement. And like most things in that house, it didn't do well without supervision. I imagined the scene, Dad pacing in his robe, flipping breakers. My stepmother tapping her frozen touchscreen with rising panic. Blankets draped over doorways, pots boiling on the stove to warm the air. They'd never even bothered to learn where the furnace filter was. Because why would they? I had always taken care of it. A few days later, Julia texted again. Your dad was at Aunt Marla's. He looked off, like really stressed. Did he say anything? Just that the house was falling apart. Said you sabotaged everything. I laughed. Sabotaged? I hadn't touched a wire. I hadn't hacked or destroyed anything. I had simply removed my presence. The absence of labor feels like sabotage only to people who never acknowledged it as labor in the first place. The next message came from someone I hadn't heard from in years, my older stepbrother, Cole. Hey, I don't know what happened, but the house is a mess. Pipes froze. Food spoiled. They can't even work the doorbell camera. Can you just fix it? I didn't answer. Because I wasn't a repair technician. I wasn't the unpaid IT department, or the ghost plumber, or the thermostat whisperer. I was a woman finally choosing her own peace. Word traveled fast in families like mine. Not because anyone called to understand, but because they needed someone to blame. An aunt messaged to say I was being immature. A cousin left a comment on one of my old Instagram posts. You used to be so sweet. What happened to you? I almost replied. I got tired of being useful to people who treated me like furniture. Instead, I deleted the post and made my account private. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after the heat incident, Ellie found me pacing the living room. You okay? She asked. Just wondering when it'll stop. When what will? The guilt. The weight. The voice in my head that says I should go back and fix it. That I'm being cold. That I should be the bigger person. She sat down beside me. Ava, you didn't cause the collapse. You just stopped holding it up. I know, I whispered. But I also know what happens when the house falls apart. People get angry. They get desperate. And they rewrite the story. She nodded. Then write your own. That night, I opened a new document on my laptop. What I did and what I didn't. Under what I did, paid every utility bill for 5 years. Managed internet, heating, security, water and power systems. Handled maintenance, scheduling, groceries and budgeting. Set up every digital system that kept that house running. Under what I didn't. Sabotage anything. Destroy property. Hack accounts or cause damage. Do anything without giving years of warning signs that I was exhausted. I saved it, not because I needed proof, but because I needed permission from myself to let go. A few days later, Ellie and I walked past a neighborhood hardware store. I stopped in front of a display of smart home kits. Thermostats, doorbells, speakers, lights. The same brands I'd installed at my dad's house. Only this time, they didn't trigger resentment. They triggered something new. Possibility. Thinking of setting something up in here? Ellie asked. Not yet, I said. But maybe when I move into my own place. You're really doing it? Yeah, I smiled. I think I'm finally ready to build a space where I don't have to serve anyone but myself. She hooked her arm through mine as we kept walking. Maintenance required, she said, grinning. Only when I choose it, I replied. Back at the apartment, I checked my email. A message from the city utilities office had come in, confirmation that my name had officially been removed from the property accounts. The last thread had been cut. That night, as I curled up on the couch under a blanket that actually smelled like home, I realized something. It wasn't the bills I'd carried all those years. It was the responsibility for people who never saw me. Now, they were learning how to function without me, and I was learning how to live without guilt. It was mid-February when I finally got the call. The sky outside was gray, the kind of cold where the air feels like paper, thin, brittle, and heavy all at once. Ellie was at work, and I was home alone, curled up with a book I hadn't been able to focus on for weeks. The phone rang. Dad flashed on the screen. For a moment, I just stared at it. Not out of anger. Not fear. Just weariness. The kind that comes from years of keeping the peace while breaking inside. I let it go to voicemail. A few seconds later, it rang again. Then again. On the fourth try, I picked up. I didn't say anything. Just waited. Ava! It had been weeks since I'd heard my name in his voice. Not the internet girl. Not the one who does the bills. Not her. Just Ava. That alone cracked something in me. He cleared his throat. Can we talk? In person. Please. I said yes. Not because I owed him anything, but because part of me still wanted answers to questions I hadn't let myself ask. The ones that had followed me like ghosts every time I lay awake at night wondering if I'd done the right thing. We met at a diner halfway between Ellie's apartment and the house I no longer called home. It was one of those places with chipped mugs and laminated menus and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. Familiar enough to feel safe, neutral enough to feel distant. He was already there when I walked in. Nervous, hunched forward, hands wrapped around a coffee cup like it was the only thing anchoring him to the table. He stood when he saw me. I didn't hug him. He didn't try. Thanks for coming, he said. I nodded and sat across from him. There was a long silence. Then, I didn't realize how much you were doing. Until it all stopped. I looked at him. Not coldly. Just directly. That's the point, Dad. You weren't supposed to just have all that. You were supposed to notice it. He swallowed hard. I thought I was the one keeping the house running. I let out a breath. Half laugh, half exhaustion. You weren't. I was. He didn't argue. For the first time in a long time, he just listened. I didn't mean to throw you out, he said. That night, things got out of hand. I was angry. You were cruel, I corrected. You looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't welcome. And the worst part is you meant it. His face dropped. You're right. He said it so quietly, it almost didn't register. I leaned back in the booth, watching him, not as a daughter desperate for approval, but as a woman finally seeing her father without the filter of childhood love or longing. You relied on me, I said, and not in a way that's normal or healthy. You expected me to be the adult, the technician, the accountant. You needed me, but you never respected me. He looked up, eyes rimmed with red. I didn't know how to show it. After your mom died, everything felt disconnected. So you disconnected from me, I said. And I filled the gap because I didn't know any better. Because I thought maybe if I kept everything running, one day you'd look at me and see more than just function. Another silence. Do you hate me? He asked, voice breaking. I shook my head slowly. No. I just don't serve you anymore. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. He nodded. I'm trying, he said. I've been paying the bills, learning the systems. The house is cold sometimes. The Wi-Fi's a mess. But I'm trying. I hope you figure it out, I said. And I meant it. Not because I wanted to fix it, but because it wasn't mine to fix anymore. He reached into his coat pocket and slid something across the table. A folded envelope. What is this? I asked. Just something I never said out loud. I opened it later, after I'd gone home. Inside was a handwritten letter. Ava, I don't deserve your help, or your silence, or your kindness. I just want you to know I see it now. All of it. I don't know what happens from here, but I hope someday you'll forgive me for what I couldn't be. Thank you for everything you carried. I'm sorry I made you carry it alone. I didn't cry. Not right away. But that night, in the quiet hum of Ellie's apartment, I finally let the grief come. Not just for what he'd said, but for all the years he hadn't. Weeks passed. Spring crept in slowly, one softened breeze at a time. I got a part-time job at a small local tech company. Started saving for my own place. Began sketching out the life I wanted, piece by piece. One morning, Ellie came into the kitchen to find me making pancakes and humming along to the radio. "You're smiling," she said, surprised. "I guess I am. You talked to your dad again?" "Yeah," I said. "Sometimes. Not often. But when I do, it feels like he's finally trying to talk to me, not just at me." She poured herself coffee and leaned against the counter. "You think things will ever go back to how they were?" I flipped a pancake. "No. And I don't want them to." She smiled. "Good." Later that night, I walked to the mailbox and found a small envelope tucked between grocery ads. My name, written in a familiar hand. Inside was a simple card. "No one's replaced you. I'm still learning how to do it on my own. Thank you for giving me the chance. Dad." I put it back in the envelope, held it in my hand for a moment, and then tucked it into my journal. I didn't reply, but I didn't need to. Because sometimes, the point of walking away isn't to make someone chase you. It's to make space for them to grow, whether or not they do. The first thing I bought for my new apartment was a lamp. Not a smart lamp. Not something that responded to voice commands or synced with an app. Just a tall, warm floor lamp with a golden base and a woven shade that gave off the kind of glow that made a space feel safe. I put it in the corner by the window, near the bookshelf I built with Ellie on a Sunday afternoon. I didn't buy it for function. I bought it for me. It sounds small, but when you've spent your whole life lighting up someone else's home, buying a lamp just for yourself feels like a revolution. It had been nearly 5 months since that Christmas night. 5 months since I walked out with a single bag and 1,000 pounds of weight finally sliding off my shoulders. Since then, I'd closed accounts, released responsibility, signed my own lease, and started sleeping through the night. The apartment wasn't big. The walls were thin, the water pressure inconsistent, and the neighbors loud. But it was mine. Every cup in the cabinet, every picture on the wall, every drawer organized just the way I liked it. There was no thermostat to manage for anyone else. No Wi-Fi to share. No one expecting me to handle a repair or solve a billing issue before they even noticed it existed. And for the first time in years, I wasn't anticipating disaster. I was just living. My dad still reached out occasionally. Small things at first. An update about the house. A forwarded joke he thought was funny. Just checking in, text on a Tuesday afternoon. He never asked for help. He didn't bring up the past unless I did. He knew better now. We were speaking. Not often, but enough. And every time I heard him say my name with a little more softness, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, he was learning. I wasn't holding my breath. I didn't need an apology wrapped in perfect words or dramatic tears. I just wanted him to mean it when he said, "I get it now." And slowly he started to. One Sunday I went by the house. Not inside. Just drove by. The grass needed cutting. The porch light was out. A plastic tarp covered the roof, where a leak had probably sprung. It didn't make me sad. It didn't make me smug. It just reminded me of how much I used to do, quietly, automatically, without being asked, and without being seen. And how little of that had ever been acknowledged. But instead of feeling bitterness, I felt something else. Distance. Not the angry kind. The healing kind. The kind that says you were there. You did everything you could, and now you're allowed to be somewhere else. The next day, I got a card in the mail. No envelope, just a folded note card with my name on the front. Inside, my father had written, "This house doesn't run the same without you. But it's running. I've learned a lot. About bills. About effort. About you. You were never just part of the household. You were holding it together. I'm sorry for realizing it too late. I'm proud of who you are, even if I didn't say it when it mattered most. Dad." I read it twice, then a third time. Then I folded it, gently, and slid it into the back of my journal. I didn't call. didn't text. I just sat on the floor of my living room, under the soft glow of my new lamp, and let the silence settle like peace instead of punishment. Because I didn't hate him. I just didn't serve him anymore. Ellie came over that night with ice cream and a bottle of cheap wine. "Your place looks amazing," she said, flopping onto the couch. "It's like you've carved out a little sanctuary in the chaos of the city." I smiled. "That's the goal." "Did you ever think this day would come?" "No," I said. "But I think the part of me that used to be afraid of leaving knew it had to." "Any regrets?" I thought about that for a moment. About all the nights I stayed silent. All the moments I gave without being asked. All the versions of myself I became just to make a home out of a house that was never really mine. "No," I said, "because it taught me the difference between being loved and being useful." We toasted to new beginnings and watched a movie with terrible special effects and the kind of cheesy dialogue that made us laugh until we couldn't breathe. And when Ellie left, I stood by the window and looked out at the city lights, flickering, blinking alive. Not perfect, but real. Mine. I think sometimes people expect closure to come with a big moment, a confrontation, a final word, a slam of a door, or a single sentence that rewrites everything. But for me, closure came in small things. In finally sleeping through the night without double-checking the utilities schedule. In turning on a light that I bought, in a home I chose, without thinking of who else needed me to keep it running. In saying no without guilt. And in waking up to a life where I didn't have to prove my worth through sacrifice. If you asked me now what I learned, I'd say this. Love doesn't look like dependency. And peace doesn't come from being needed. It comes from choosing yourself, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I still think of my father. But now, when I do, it's not with anger. It's with distance, with grace, and with the quiet strength of someone who finally knows. That letting go was never about revenge. It was about relief. And the courage to finally build a life where the only thing I maintain is my own light.